All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. We are Group 4. Our project is Carebit, and Carebit is an informal remote caregiving app that works with the Fitbit API. So before we dive into the project, I'd like to introduce you to the team. My name is Blake Douglas. I'm the project manager. I also worked heavily on the front end.
My name is Evan Hausman. I worked primarily on the front end and the API.
My name is Austin, and I worked on the API and the database.
My name is Betul, and I work on the front end.
My name is Jimmy, and I also work on the front end.
My name is Jorge, and I work on the database and front end.
Right. And for those of you that don't know, our sponsor for this project, at the top, we have Dr. Pamela Wisnowski. She's now a computer science professor at Vanderbilt. She just recently transferred from UCF. Underneath her, who we had more direct contact with, is Momtaj Akhtar. She's also following Dr. Pamela Wisnowski to Vanderbilt. She's a PhD student, and they both work under the STIR Labs Development Group, which examine interactions between technology and people, and they also help to bring underrepresented minorities and women into STEM. Excuse me. So what problem is Carebit trying to solve? The main problem that Carebit is trying to solve is that caregivers really need a way to monitor their loved ones. According to a study produced by AARP, there are 53 million US adults that offer unpaid caregiving every year. This is a 20% increase to the same study that was produced just 5 years ago. So this shows that there's a huge market out there and that it's rapidly growing. Talking about the market, the current market truly just doesn't suffice for helping these caregivers provide the care that they need to. It's very expensive. A prime example of this is an ECG, which costs roughly $1,000 that monitors your heart rate. But for giving unpaid caregiving, that's a very high buy-in. A lot of these options are also very privacy invasive. All companies are selling your data like crazy these days. And along with that, a lot of the technology out there monitors you 24/7, no matter when you want to turn that monitoring off. It just doesn't give any availability to the caregivee, and they kind of feel like they're being spied on since they're being watched all the time. Another problem is that they simply don't contain enough data. An example of this is Life Alert. It only triggers when somebody falls down or manually clicks the button. With today's technology, we should be able to tell, hey, we need to check up on somebody before the event actually happens. And then on to the previous version of Carebit. The problem with that is it just simply wasn't ready yet. It was limited to iOS with over 44% of the US mobile users on Android. We were missing a huge market share by only having iOS capability. Along with that, it only offered a one-to-one relationship.
Hey, Blake,
Yes.
Is it possible for you guys to share your slides through Zoom as well?
Yeah. Scroll up, hit the Zoom control. Hit no.
Back to the other one.
Good.
Yeah.
You need to be in the meeting control. Hit share screen and share the browser.
Actually, is it good if I just do the whole screen? Because then when I transition into the
That's fine.
perfect. All right, go to there. Control.
Yeah, thank you. That's a lot.
Awesome.
Great.
Love it.
All right, perfect. And then the other problem with it, with the previous version, is that there was only a one-to-one relationship with between caregivers and caregivees. So say, for instance, I want to look after my grandma and my grandpa. I would have to have made 2 different accounts and try to connect it through that way. So that was very inconvenient for a real-world scenario. And the other problem with it is it had a couple of bugs that we looked into.
So our solution is to create an informal remote caregiving app that allows caregivers to monitor their loved one. The data we aim to provide includes heart rate, the number of steps they've taken, as well as providing notifications to a caregiver when they receive concerning health data. We also require that the buy-in for the app needs to be very cheap. We achieve this using Fitbits, which the cheapest versions are less than $100, ensuring that a caregiver doesn't need to spend too much in order to ensure that they're monitored correctly. Building upon the previous app, we aimed to originally support only Android. However, we decided to use one code base using React Native to provide a full cross-platform experience that provides support for not only Android and iOS, but also tablets and everything in between. Furthermore, we aim to add new features built upon the previous Carebit app, as well as fix some of the reliability and consistency issues.
All right, and then on to the team management for this project. For all of our internal communication, we use Discord. Within Discord, we had separate channels for different functionality. For instance, we use general for all of our day-to-day communication. We also had a channel specifically for our meeting times. So it just had where we're meeting, what time we're meeting, and when. And we also had another channel that was separately for APK downloads, strictly to test the app. Built on top of Discord, we use the Orly Discord bot, which helped with agile meetings. It gives you stand-up questions and retrospective questions for all of your sprints. You can answer the questions directly into Discord, and it kind of helped with a group in our scenario where we're not all in the same spot every single day. Along with that, we use GitHub for version control. Many of us also use GitHub Desktop, which helped with push and pull commits, just simplifying it into one unifying process. And then to communicate with our sponsors, they instantly came to us. They wanted to use Skype for their communication because that's what they were familiar with. And since we all knew how to use Skype, we decided to use that for all of our sponsor communication. Then within the group, we use Google Drive to share all of our documents, our presentation, including this one, and videos between each other. We also use the G Suite, Google's Word document and all of that, so that we could simultaneously work on documents at the same time, especially since Google Drive offers up to 15 gigabytes of free data. And then for all of our sponsor related documents, they already had a Dropbox account set up for the previous version of Carebit. So we were able to provide them with all of our files through Dropbox.
Project budget and financing. Today, we have 6 Fitbit outside charge for the price of $900. Each device has the cost of $150. We have used these devices in order to test if we are correctly sending and retrieving data from the Fitbit server. Also, we have the App Store fee for $99. We use this service to be able to upload our application to the App Store or to TestFlight, which is a tool that is used to test iOS applications. Also, we have 1 year of Dropbox Plus service for the price of $119.88. We use this service to share and store files. Also, we have 1 year of DigitalOcean service, which is our host for our backend server for the price of $50, which makes a total to the date of $1,000 and $168.88. Also, we have a future expected expense that is the Google Play fee for $25. We are going to use this service in order to be able to upload our application to the Google Play Store, which will make an overall total of $1,193.88.
All right, so what are our project requirements for this? Since this is a version 2 of Carebit, our project requirements, first and foremost, they wanted support for both iOS and Android. The previous version, as I said, only supported iOS, so we're missing a huge market share by not having Android support. Then they also wanted to make sure that iOS and Android were able to pair together. For obvious reasons, you wouldn't want Android to only be able to go to Android and iOS to only be able to go to iOS. That would make a lot of users kind of upset and just is a functionality that it certainly should have. Along with that, they wanted faster and more reliable syncing since they were having issues with that in the previous version. They also wanted they wanted to make it optional for the Carebit to download the app. This because we're dealing with a lot of elderly people and sick people typically is the general market for this app. And they may be reluctant to download the app or unable to download the app. And then on top of that, they wanted the multi-user relationship that we discussed a little bit to where caregivers could connect to multiple caregivers and vice versa.
So the tech stack for Carebit in the front end, we used React Native, the Expo command line interface, and the Android Studio emulator. And that was really great for simulating what it looked like on Android before we actually had to port it over to the actual phone. And for the back end, we used Flask, which is a Python micro framework for all web applications. And we also used, in combination with Flask, the web server gateway interface, which was really great for deploying applications that needed to have threads and concurrency going. And we use MySQL as a database. And of course, on our server, we had a Linux operating system.
Building upon the inclusion of Expo in the previous slide, we'd like to further harp upon the benefits that Expo provided to us. It is great for building the app at a click of a button. It's great for testing with hot reloading. It made the testing process extremely easy. Furthermore, there are many processes which may have been extremely difficult to implement in one code base with true cross-platform functionality. However, Expo provides this functionality fairly well. For example, it allows for cross-platform notifications as well as asynchronous storage with the Secure Store module.
So just talking about the system architecture of our app. So the process starts at the Fitbit watch. From the Fitbit watch, it syncs the data to the Fitbit app. And the data from the Fitbit app is of course stored on the Fitbit server. And what our Carebit server does is it fetches the data, it pulls it down from the Fitbit server through API calls. And once it has this data, it's verified through a threshold to determine whether or not to send a notification to our Carebit app, which will come obviously as a notification from the app that the user is using.
So this is how our caregiver dashboard looks like. We have on the top we have last recorded activity, which is the caregiver's heart rate and the steps, and on the bottom half of the page we display the calculated heart rate summary of the caregiver, which includes the minimum, average and maximum heart rate, along with the total steps they have taken. And at the very top, where it says 0 alerts today, it mainly shows all the alerts that have happened during that specific day, with an option to view all of the alerts that have ever happened between those two accounts. And we also have emergency call option, which in this case, it's on the top right corner where it says call Billy. When you click on it, then it prompts you to call that phone number associated with that person.
On the caregiver side of things, as you can also see, they have the ability to call their caregiver. Also, like the caregiver dashboard, they have the ability to see the alerts that they were sent today. But more importantly, on the caregiver dashboard is the three privacy options. Whenever any of these privacy options are ticked, it reflects that privacy option on the caregiver's homepage with a banner at the top that shows that the user has selected one of these privacy options. For example, if the caregiver selects sleep mode, then it'll turn notifications off, and the caregiver will see a banner at the top of their homepage saying their caregiver has fallen asleep and that they're not to be bothered. The do not disturb mode is also similar. It turns off notifications, and in the case that a chat feature were to be implemented in the future, it would disable the chat feature.
Just to make sure that the caregivee has fallen asleep and stuff.
Yes.
Yes.
It is.
This is the caregiver's dashboard, and those are their privacy options.
Furthermore, the caregiver has the option of disabling monitoring to ensure that at any point, if they do not wish for their data to be collected or shared, at no point will the data be collected. We want the caregiver to have the ultimate say in whether their data is being collected, and if the monitoring is turned off, that's the end of the story. None of their data is to be collected.
So we re-implemented the notification history and made it account specific. For instance, a caregiver alert will be different for each linked account, and based on their notification reference. And we made it so from that screen, both of them, the caregiver and the caregivee, can view all the alerts between their accounts. And it can be useful for checking repeat events to see if particular activity that they do during that time of the day elevates their heart rate or something. And it could also be useful for to show the doctor to show how their heart rate has been doing and around how many steps they've been taking daily. And we also have added functionality of checking in on the caregiver side. So the caregiver simply just mark an alert to saying that they are doing okay, and it will be displayed on the caregiver side. And so the caregiver will know that their caregiver is doing okay, and they will know not to worry about them.
So in addition to this, we also have notification options. So what you're seeing over here where it says activity level, basically the user has the option of going in and selecting either active, sedentary, or homebound. And based on the options that they choose, it'll go through and kind of have the switches for them. It'll have the heart rates and certain switches enabled depending what they choose. Or if they want, they can turn on use custom alerts. And this just means they'll have to go through and they can manually choose what works best for them.
So we currently pull data from Fitbit, with from their recommended secure authorization process, but it comes with some limitations. First off, if the Fitbit app is not open in the background, then and the service is terminated, then the watch will not communicate to the servers, and it won't sync anything at all. And if the Fitbit app is open, then it will only sync once every 15 minutes, and if the app is refreshed. And our current solution to that would be displaying a reminder to sync to the Fitbit app if it's been over an hour since we have received any data. And the caregiver will also receive a no push sync notification so that they can remind their caregiver to open the app. And our future possible solutions would include looking into other smartwatches for if they have any kind of API limitations on how or when we can receive the data. And the second one would be developing our own smartwatch to sync directly to Carebit's server, so we don't have any limitations on another software.
So building upon the previous Carebit app, one of the main requirements was for multiple relationships, as spoken of earlier. You know, in the real world, it's not as simple as one caregiver has one caregivee. You know, there are some caregivers who are caregivers by trade. They might have multiple people that they need to take care of throughout the day. And likewise, a caregiver might need 24/7 assistance, and they might need somebody to keep track of them over the course of their entire day, which no one person can handle. Sometimes one person needs multiple of any other person connected to them. So we implemented this system, first of all, in the front end with a request system, where based on the user's phone number, they can send a request to an account, and that account will receive a list of requests that have been sent to them. They have the option to accept or decline these requests. Once they've accepted these requests, they will have a list of their accepted connections. They have the ability to select between these different connections to display the different caregivers. So for example, if you have 3 selected caregivers, you can select one and then it'll display that user's data. And then you can select the other and then it'll display that other user's data. That way you can switch between all of the different connected users at will.
All right, and then our other requirement was to make it optional for the caregiver to install the app. To implement this, the logic behind that is we have a caregiver make their own account, and then when they would link to a caregiver upon registration, they have 2 options to either choose that the person has the app, so they can just add them directly by phone number, or they can click the use my device option. When they do that, they'll be prompted with a warning that says, hey, you need to sign in to your caregiver's Fitbit, so make sure you know their Fitbit credentials. Once they accept that, they'll then make a full caregiver account, including the name, email, phone number, password for their account, and then they'll also provide the physician information, including the name and the phone number, and then they'll sign into the caregiver's Fitbit account, which then links the Fitbit account to the caregiver account. And then in the background of Carebit, we send a request between the 2 accounts, and it automatically accepts them to make the caregiver and the caregiver friends. So we could have simplified this process by making the caregiver not have to make that full caregiver account. The problem with that is we have a lot of text fields on the caregiver dashboard, such as name, the phone number that syncs to it, the physician info. And without having that information, we wouldn't have anything to put in those name fields. And then along with that, our first thought was, what if the caregiver wants to install the app in the future? How can we possibly link those two accounts? And so since it already made sense for the person to fill out a little bit of information about the caregiver during that registration, we just decided to make them a full account during the connection, so that way they could have an account to use and it would be all done through one phone. The benefit of this is that elderly people can be reluctant towards installing apps, as we all know. And along with that, since a lot of the primary audience will be sick people may be unavailable to install an app at a certain time, so they can now go download it later rather than having to do it while they're not feeling very well. Along with that, not everyone has a phone, so by being able to do all of it through just one device, we can now reach as big of an audience and include as many people as possible.
So for the front end, we mostly kept a similar structure as the previous team did. The only major difference we have done was the separating API calls to create an extra layer of security. As you can see on the picture here, the API calls are being called as functions, and it also helped to keep front-end code dry, since we are calling them as functions rather than writing out the entire API call whenever we needed them. And it also provided quicker compilation and runtime, since it has reduced the amount of code significantly that way. And separating them by provider will also help with the maintenance by checking, by knowing exactly which file to check for the API call if something goes wrong or needs to be changed. Along with that, it provides easier extendability by being able to make a new file to support external hardware.
So these are some additional front-end improvements that we made on the app. One thing that we chose to do was we chose to keep the common blue green gradient. We chose to keep it on multiple screens as we first implemented in our registration during the onboarding process when the user first registers and creates an account. Another thing we did, even though it wasn't required, was since we developed the app in React Native and we verified all the spacing, we were able to actually make this app compatible with iPads and tablets as well. And another important thing that we also implemented was the use of international phone numbers. So this was our, I guess, kind of first step in internationalizing the app. We basically allowed the user during the registration process to choose their country, and then from there put in their number, whereas before the user could just type in any number and we would have no way of knowing what country the number was associated with. And another thing we did was we chose to have a hamburger menu on the menu screen of the app, which would make it easier for the users to just see all the options available to them just by clicking on the menu. We thought it would be the best thing to do.
So in the previous version of Carebit and the old backend consisting of the API and the database, there was a lot of older versions of everything installed, including Flask and Python. So if we wanted to install a new package that needed newer versions of those items, then we'd have to just update it one at a time. So instead of doing that, we just went in and updated everything at once, which actually took a while at first because the server also had an older version of Ubuntu on it, which needed updating. And the email system for sending requests between caregiver and caregivee, that was also done through email, which was kind of cumbersome. So we switched to doing it in app. And the old connection system between a caregiver, caregivee, and vice versa was done just one-to-one. And we had to change all that in the app and the database to work for multiple to multiple. So a caregivee could have multiple caregivers and vice versa. There was no physician information handling. We weren't storing it, we weren't handling it. And now we do. The Fitbit API calls that we were making, they were a little outdated as well. So they needed new headers and new request bodies and different requirements for requesting that information. And there was also a lot of testing that wasn't being done. So if an error happened that was unforeseen, it kind of crashed the entire app, or at least made an unhandled error. And in the new backend, there's a lot of updates to the app dependencies and newer versions of Flask, Python, and Ubuntu on the server. The backend infrastructure is now set up to handle multiple caregiver and caregivee connections. It's not done through email, but in the actual application itself. The Fitbit API calls are now updated to Fitbit's documentation. It's also ready to handle and store caregivee information that is a part of the new infrastructure in the database. The authorization process is now tracked a little bit more precisely through the use of just a numbering system, and each number representing a different stage of the process for either caregiver or caregivee. And the notification support between linked users is now handled a little bit better. The backend bug fixes that we went through, the last team left off with, like I was saying earlier, a lot of unhandled exceptions for the code that they had. It was just thrown in one indent. There was no try catch or error handling. And a lot of the time there was duplicate notifications getting sent to users for the same thing. And we cut that down to only happen every once in a while instead of every single time a notification happened. And threads and concurrency in general, at first it was sort of a problem because they were using threads to handle multiple requests being made to the application. But then I realized the WSGI file that we had, the web server gateway interface, was actually handling that just fine. But at first it was giving us problems with multiple notifications coming in from Fitbit. And like I was saying, with the excessive notifications, a lot of them had to do with low or dead battery. So that was handled. And that was done through a counter that helped limit the alerts to every hour instead of every sync. And what also needs to happen is, because there was so many lack of error catching in the API, there are still some cases where an error might happen that isn't being handled accurately yet. So we still need to go in, or the next team that works on it will need to handle that or test it a little bit more thoroughly. And yeah.
One important feature of our application is notifications, since this is the way how caregivers can know if something is happening to their caregivers. For example, if a caregiver is having high or low heart rates, or if the application has not detected any steps over a certain time, the application will send a notification to alert the caregivers so they can take any action about these events. In order to implement notifications, we have used Expo notifications, which is a Expo tool that is used to send push notifications to Android and iOS devices. The advantage of using this tool is that it makes the process simple and easier, since we don't have to handle with the Apple push notification service for iOS or with the Firebase cloud messaging for Android, because Expo takes care of that, saving us time on the front end and back end. Also, something to mention is that there are two types of notifications, which are local notifications and push notifications. Local notifications are the ones that are sent and scheduled by the app itself, and push notifications are the ones that are sent by a server using a request. So in this case, for our application, we have used push notifications. In order to implement that, we have to follow 3 steps. The first step is to get the user's permission to send them push notifications and to get an Expo push token. The Expo push token is a user identifier, which will be stored in the users table in the database. The next step is to make a request. We can do this in 2 ways. The first way is by calling the Expo API on the front end, using as argument the Expo push token that we stored previously, the title, and the content of the notification. And the second way is by using a server SDK on the backend, which has the same functionality as the previous way. For our application, we have used the second way since it's easier and faster to get the conditions needed to trigger a notification on the backend. In the following picture, we can see this process. First, we have to retrieve the Expo push token. We send that token to the Expo backend, and this will send a notification to the user having that token using Firebase Cloud Messages, Firebase Cloud Messaging for Android devices, using Apple, the Apple notification service for iOS devices. The last step consists of taking a particular action when a notification comes. For our application, once we receive a notification, the application will take the user to the home screen.
We've made some security improvements from the previous Carebit app. Notably, we've added increased password requirements, like for example, needing a capital, perhaps numbers in your password. We use regular expressions to sanitize the input fields, and plus keyboards, different type of keyboards to ensure that the exact type of data that's inputted into the input fields, like for example, for the phone number, only numbers can be inputted to prevent injections and the like. Furthermore, in the front end, we aim to only use maintain packages. That way, if there's a security update that needs to be installed, that we have access to it immediately. Also, in the front end, we use in iOS it's Keychain and in Android it's Key Store, collected together into one code base using Expo's Secure Store module to store sensitive data so that we can have persisting data between sessions. That way we can make it so that the user doesn't need to log in every time that they open the app. In the backend, we collaborated with the UCF IT team to determine the best practice for storing passwords in the backend. That method ended up being salting and hashing them. Furthermore, we have a two-step authentication process. Not only does the caregivee specifically need to accept the specifications from Fitbit for them to share their data with Fitbit, but they also need to accept a request from a caregiver to have that person have access to their data. So it's a two-step process that ensures that under no circumstances their data shared if they don't wish it to be. Finally, we have two-factor authentication for our database and all of the accounts related to the Carebit project to ensure that all of our accounts are as safe as can be.
All right, then on to our takeaways for this project. As stated, Carebit has been fully rebuilt in React Native to provide both full functionality and cross-platform support for Android and iOS. Along with that, all the known inherited bugs from the previous Carebit team have been fixed to our knowledge. We also added several UI and UX updates to make sure that the app flowed as evenly as possible. And then on top of that, we heavily expanded both the back end and the front end to support an in-app friend request system, which satisfies our multi-user relationship that the sponsors requested. We have also implemented all old and new features that our sponsors requested into this version of Carebit. And along with that, we heavily improved the security of Carebit as a whole. Any questions?
I have a number of them, so but I can come in at any point in time here.
Do you typically do it before the demo or?
I think we usually do the demo first.
Yeah,
Demo, then questions?
Yes,
Do the
'cause that could
questions.
affect my
Okay,
question.
do the demo first then.
Because I think the demo helps give people a better idea of what's going on.
Right,
Perfect.
agreed.
All right, can you guys see the screen or no?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, I need to refresh. All right. Sorry, and since we are using Expo on the UCF network, Expo runs a little bit slow, so just bear with us while we're trying to handle that because we have to run it through a tunnel rather than a direct IP connection. So give me just 1 second while these load.
Can you elaborate on that actually over time? What's going on that you have to run it through a tunnel?
Something with the UCF connection blocks Expo through directly connecting. I don't know what it is. I had the same condition at my work, but. Okay. All All right, so everybody can see it. We decided to run it through an emulator. Along with that, sorry, let me get rid of that header. Along with that, since we already had iOS support before, this way it helps us to show both the Android side, and I decided to include a tablet so that you guys can see we also have tablet support. Note that notifications unfortunately don't work on emulators, so we won't be able to show that to everybody, but notifications are fully working on the caregiver side. I'm going to go ahead and log into a Caregivee account that I created yesterday as an example. All right, so here we have the Caregivee side. Caregivee is currently connected to a person named John. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys creating a caregiver account and then linking these two accounts. And that way I'll be able to display our full adding process for multi-users. All right, so here, as I showed in the slides that we have, you have two options. You can either click the Use My Device, which will warn you that you need to know your user's Fitbit credentials in order to use this option. Through this, you'll be able to do what we refer to as the opt-out feature, to where you can just connect to the Caregivee account yourself. Since my Caregivee account is already made, I'm going to go ahead and they have the app option. Along with that, you can also click the skip in the top right there if you're not ready to add your Caregivee yet. And then on here, as we pointed out, we have a full country support. This is an extremely extensive list. You can also search for whichever country you would like to find, and it'll pull it up for you. And then you just enter the phone number here.
That's too many.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. Click send request. It'll tell you that your request has been sent and then bring you over to your dashboard. Since this person doesn't have an added Caregivee at the moment, the dashboard looks a little bit different. It prompts them to add a Caregivee, and their settings will kind of be limited since they don't have anybody added. We implemented once a request is sent on either side, the person will actually receive a push notification. Hey, Smith Light wants to be your friend. Along with that, a notification alert icon pops up on the tablet side so that they know that they have a friend request. From here, you can either reject the request, which will remove it, or you can accept it, which will give them access to all your information of your Fitbit. So we're going to go ahead and allow this person to be our caregiver, sorry, and then they will be added to our My Caregivee tab, which we will go find them there. Currently, we still have John selected as our primary user. So all of this information is related to John's account. So if I were to click the Call John button, it would call the phone number selected on John's account. We can also view John's physician information, or sorry, this account's physician information, and we can view that John is our selected user right here. And then this header up here is our information. Going back to My Caregivees, we can see both people are here. If I were to select Smith, Smith is now my primary view, and I can view all the information here. Go ahead and refresh this side. So I've been wearing this Fitbit for about 24 hours now, maybe a little bit less, but this is all my data for today. I verified just a little bit earlier. If I open the Fitbit app, this is exactly the number of steps that I've taken. Along with that, this is how many I've taken in the hour. This is all live data. None of this is hard-coded whatsoever. My Fitbit currently has high battery. My heart rate, the last recorded 2 minutes ago, was 82 beats per minute.
So this is the actual running app with actual.
Correct. I have Fitbit open on my phone right now, and it's connected directly to this Fitbit. And then, as we stated, we made alerts different between each account. So if you saw when I was connected to John, I have 11 alerts because that's the person I've been connected to since yesterday. These are all the alerts between our accounts. This is an ever-growing list. There's actually more than 11 here since I started it yesterday, but this shows the total day limit. And then we'll go ahead and swap back over to Smith. And as you can see, all the alerts are gone since this account was just recently added. On the caregiver side, we can click this and it'll prompt us to set up all of our custom alerts. We also implemented, it shows like recommended values underneath all the different options so that they kind of have an idea of what to select for their custom alerts. If I went ahead and, well, actually, let me go ahead and sign into I can show you deleting request or deleting a user fully works. And then once they request, all your data will be completely removed from their screen. It automatically does that after a couple of seconds. You just have to wait for it. But just so the users know, their data is fully removed once they delete a user. I'll go ahead and sign into the other account just so I can show you how notifications work between the two.
So just make sure that once you delete your data, your caregiver can't even get access to the history data anymore.
Correct. They have no access to anything.
Okay.
Sorry. What's that?
So basically, as soon as their session figures out, it should be data dies.
Yes, and then it removes all of their data. So, and then we can go ahead and go into the view history. If I were to check in on this alert, it prompts, hey, are you sure you want to mark this alert that you're okay? Your caregiver will be able to see it. And once this page refreshes, it instantly pops up so that they can know that, okay, that alert I do not need to worry on. And again, go into the settings on this side now, you can see your selective caregivee and their phone number. You can see the physician information in case there's an emergency situation in which you need to contact their doctor. There's the alert section to where you can either select a preset or you can use your custom alerts. Selecting a preset automatically turns your custom alerts off.
Somebody hit the volume up button.
Automatically turns your custom alerts off as it should. You can go back in here and then re-edit all of these to be exactly what you want to be. Since it automatically uses the numbers, I don't know if you noticed before, but they have changed since the last time we were in here. All of these are fully customizable. You can scroll through a huge range of numbers to select exactly what you want for every single one.
So let me, I'm gonna interject a question.
Yes.
This may be a next version question, if there is a next version. Is that, are those numbers informed, or do you need to just pick numbers? I guess since it's the caregiver picking the numbers, the hope would be that the caregiver is informed, but just in case it's an amateur caregiver, like a family member, has there been any thought to informing those numbers?
So we kind of are like, we do give suggestive values. They're kind of hard to see on such a small scale. When you have a phone in front of you, it's easier to see. We do give suggestive values underneath each alert. For instance, if you look up online, hey, what's the recommended low heart rate? What's your range? It's 60 to 100. So we actually put that underneath each option so they kind of have an idea. And then if they select a certain preset, they can see what it is set to. And then they can kind of change it based off of those values.
Okay. Sorry.
So that's manual. You don't do baselines then at all.
I'm sorry, one more time.
You don't do a baseline on the caregivee at all. You assume that the caregiver sets the ranges and not a baseline that occurs for the caregivee.
So yes, going off of that, on registration, caregivee sees this screen and they select the usual activity level for their account. So say the caregivee selects sedentary. Every caregiver that added that caregivee would have that set as their their initial value, but then they can obviously, yes.
Let me, so Charlie, you're right. They're not making a baseline based on the individual. However, I believe what they did is based on these activity levels, they created some default thresholds.
Yes.
I do want to point out to you the next time you give a presentation on this, don't have 89 as a low heart rate. You have that on one of the slides.
I agree with that. I was trying to get a bunch of alerts for the presentation.
If you pick sedentary, you get different initial values than if you pick active or homebound.
Exactly. So these will all set different limits depending on which activity level they choose.
Yeah, the thing is that if you have sedentary versus active, the person may change from moment to moment. Maybe they go out and play pickleball or tennis in the morning, and they want to indicate that they're at a higher level of activity than watching the football games that afternoon.
That is definitely a good point. And and that can bring me to the privacy options. All these are fully functional. The sleep mode, if the person turns on that they're going to sleep, this person, the caregiver, will no longer receive notifications at all saying that it'll let them know that they're going to sleep, and they won't receive any notifications. Obviously, that won't be great for saying you're going to play pickleball, but in that scenario, they could turn on the do not disturb mode. And it just kind of says, hey, I don't want to be disturbed. It disables that calling feature there, and it also stops notifications. But they can still see all the live data. However, if the person didn't want to be monitored, they can go ahead and pause the monitoring using this option. And then once this refreshes, it'll clear all the data from their dashboard temporarily until that mode is turned back on. And so that way the caregiver, once again, has full control over all of their data.
So one suggestion that I would have for the privacy preferences is I could see what's going to happen is they'll turn one of them on, but then forget to turn it back off. So for instance, for the sleep mode, giving them a time to say, okay, do sleep mode now, but then turn it off at 8 a.m. or something. Or for the do not disturb, have it be for the next hour. Because otherwise what'll happen is false alarms, because they're going to turn it off and the monitoring will be turned off, and then you don't always remember, hey, I need to be monitored again.
Of course. And the good part about that is, since it is reflected on the caregiver's screen, the caregiver can always go in and remind the caregiver, hey, you have do not disturb mode on. Can you please turn that off for me so I can see or get notifications once again if it has been an extended amount of time. But that is a good suggestion, certainly.
I think a major concern Charlie was getting at with the what is a high or low heart rate, and that it's actually very context dependent and ever fluctuating.
Yeah, right.
Means that there's going to be a high rate of false positives, and if you're a caregiver, that's an extremely stressful job. And so to get false positives can either be quite distressing, or it could get you to a point of where you're ignoring certain types of alerts. And so having kind of uneducated users who don't know what high or low heart rate is, or that this isn't context dependent, I think there are some different workarounds. I wonder if there would be one where if you have it where the caregiver can ask for a check-in, and it gives like a notification to the caregiver, like, we're doing a check-in, pick what activity you're doing right now. Are you resting, sporting, whatever? And there's like a little menu, or they can type in a different option. So it's like an automated check-in, like, I'm worried, but you just need to press a button to respond.
Yeah, I'm curious to ask, and this is getting ahead of the questions a little bit, and I do apologize, but I'm curious to ask, and this is totally not a selfish question in any way that I am asking on behalf of the senior design instruction team, and that totally none of that at all. Are you thinking of going another round on this app? Because now that, frankly, the dang thing is pretty much working, you could do a lot of that refinement. And what do we really want out of the workflows and that sort of thing with another round of the app? Did you have a chance to do a true enhancement pass? Were you thinking about that, or?
Well, I'll take that question, since this team's probably like, what, we're ready to graduate.
I think it was for you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was for the, I'm sorry, that question was for the sponsors.
Yeah, so I mean, our next step is once the app's like fully functional, we test it and we are ready to do a user study. Just getting some initial data from a user study to understand from participants what they really care about. Like, so for instance, one of the things that we really wanted to consider in this app is privacy. For instance, if you're a caregiver to a caregivee that's like sexually active and they're wearing a Fitbit, you don't want to like raise an alert for like something that would be embarrassing to them. And so being able to turn off the sleep modes and everything. But you're right. I think there is an opportunity to do more AI predictive learning in the app where, for instance, if the caregivee is a long-term wearer of a Fitbit, we can maybe pull some historical data to be able to set intelligent defaults based on the individual. Or if they're new to using a Fitbit, then we could adjust that over time. I mean, we just have to get over that cold start problem. So yeah, these are definitely things that we could do. And I think one of the challenges is that Fitbit only updates like every 15 minutes. And so we have to make sure caregivers know that this is a near real time, not real time monitoring app.
Can I make a comment on that? We're looking at the Polar because of the problems with the Fitbit, because we're trying to do real time, and real time AI does not work every 15 minutes. That is not exactly real time.
Right. And I mean, we're also just trying to do more everyday technologies, because I think the market space that we're in is just, we want something with a low barrier of entry that people could use for lightweight monitoring.
Yeah.
Just as a heads up, I think that the Garmin watches we've used in studies get down to the minute in terms of updating. But I don't know if that's
Yeah, there are some issues there I'll bring up. That it was really nice in an older Garmin. The new ones have actually become less accessible. So
yeah, that's right.
Polar is one that's only $89. And so you might want to look at that. Just
Is
as
it Polar, Polar?
POLAR.
Okay. I'll have to see if they have, do they have an API?
They do. And we're going to be using it, so I can give you some early indicators as how well it works for us.
That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, we started this project with Fitbit back in 2015 or 2016 with when Damla got the REU on IoT. So it started out as an undergraduate project for that. And so it's evolved since then. So I think this team's brought it a long way to have it be production ready for a user study. And I think the next step is just figuring out where we want to go from there. And Charlie or Mary Jean, if you want to collaborate on that, this is unfunded research. So I keep having it as like, I'm trying to get like a undergraduate student to do the user study as their honors thesis or something like that, just because we love this project. Like it's Momtaj's like baby too at this point. But we also don't have like a ton of resources to keep reinventing the wheel.
So one question I had, which a lot of people in the age group you're dealing with have congestive heart failure. And you don't pick that up as much from as heart rate as you do from respiration issues related to that. So you may want to look at, I know respiration is hard to get directly, but there are some surrogates for it that you can get off of just a watch. And there's some data you can pull there. Again, I'll give you information as we're working on that right now.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to mention to the team is they kind of framed this as like an elderly caregiving app. But really one of the things that we were also thinking about is for people with living alone who have diabetes and you know, if they lose consciousness, or people who roam like with autism and they need to stay like in a local area. So we're trying to expand the use cases a little bit with the number of steps and the heart rate. But you're right, there are some other factors like that, you know, iWatches can pick up on about falls and other things. And so it's really just doing a evaluation of like the different sensors on these wearable devices that you can get data points from.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
know some of these watches have like a stress measure too, which I could see being important. I just had my grandma, she had to keep her stress levels down because she was having a heart failure. And so I could see stress being relevant, having a mental health aspect. I just wanted to chime in and say one thing I thought was really nice from what you did with the preferences. It looks like if the caregivee says sleep mode, the caregiver gets a sleep that they are on sleep. So it differentiates between if they're losing the signal because they're sleeping, do not disturb, they want to turn off monitoring versus it's just flatlining. Like, oh, did they take off the watch? Are they sleeping? Do they
Are
not
they
want to be
dead?
disturbed? Yeah, and so I mean, that's like the kind of tailoring that I think looks really nice on this. So I can see a ton of improvements that you did that was crystal clear in the presentation. And that was a nice thing that I was looking out for as you were presenting, that there's some clear messaging and that's there.
Thank you. Couple of quick questions here. You said you figured out how to get it to complain when you close the Fitbit app after a while.
So Fitbit app actually does that for you. If you
Awesome.
close the Fitbit app, it says, hey, for the best experience, we need you to reopen the Fitbit app. Within our app, we implemented, I don't know if you saw that one screen, if it's been an hour since the person's received data, on the caregivee screen, right up here, it'll say, right here, it'll say reminder to sync to Fitbit app. And then underneath the steps here, it'll say, ask John to sync to the Fitbit app.
If I have two caregivers, do they both get data at the same time?
Caregiver. Yes, they can toggle between you and you'll still get notifications no matter who you have selected.
Okay, so who I have selected is who I am displaying, not an exclusive as to who I am.
Correct.
Sending
Yes.
information.
Yes.
Awesome. Lastly, you said you have mostly dealt with the duplicate notifications problem. Can you put a little more quantification on that most for me?
So I think duplicate is probably a bad term for that. The problem was that if you had a low battery or if you had no battery in your Fitbit, every single time you were syncing to the Fitbit app, you would receive a notification for that. So you were getting hundreds of notifications a day. So we just limited it to make it every hour. We figured that would be a good time for somebody to charge up their Fitbit.
So basically, you can't get you're saying you can't get the same meta notification more than once an hour.
Yes.
So let me ask from Senior Design, sponsors, what do you think? How do you like what you have gotten here?
Taj, do you want to give your feedback first?
Hi, so I really loved the improvement we got so far, and you guys did a very good job. And I have a bunch of list of feedback, overall positive and negatives, and I'm going to send you after this presentation. And also I didn't get a chance fully tested these functionalities, so yes, I need to work with you, Blake, so right after this presentation. But I do not have specific questions, so if you guys want to carry on for the questions.
So I'll go ahead and give my feedback. So the things that I really liked is this team had great communication and they were very professional when they did their updates. I think they did a great job as long as Momtaj's testing goes well, because there's always the devils in the details. One thing that I would have liked to see a little bit more of is that Blake kind of took ownership of this team. And I think as the project manager, I think that made sense of he was the one leading the communication with the sponsor. But there's some folks on the senior design team that I oh, wow, this person's even on this team. And so it would have been great if all of the team members were more visible and showed their contributions during the 2 semesters that we worked with you. Because I got more of a feeling of everything's led by Blake and a few people I hear every now and then, but I would have loved to get to know all of you during the semester and to hear from all of you and what important work that you're doing. And so I think that was my major feedback is there's sometimes when I'm surprised when different people start presenting during a senior design presentation that I'm like, oh, I haven't heard from this person before. And I think this is one of the things I tell my PhD students is like when you're working on a team, always make sure that your work individually is visible as well. But that's my feedback. And if you guys could send me the grading sheet, and then Montage and I will fill that out after she has a chance to fully test everything and make sure that she's gotten all the documentation.
We'll get that to you ASAP. And I will also say that speaking from the senior design faculty side, we're also going to take what you just said into account in terms of encouraging teams to show visibility internally to their sponsors in general, because I think that's great feedback in terms of the senior design project, in terms of the senior design process in general. So we'll take that into account at course level as well.
Great. And it was great working with you guys, and thank you for being flexible, because I know that I've been MIA more this semester than any other since I've been working with senior design.
So can I make a snarky comment that's not snarky towards you? It is, talk to the people at Workday and teach them about not sending notifications thousands of times a day.
Oh, goodness.
That's a really good point you made, and it has been a subject of annoyance to the rest of us who have to deal with Workday.
I believe that.
All right.
Okay. Good job. Thank you.
Hey everyone, can we take a group photo maybe, like Blake?
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. If you want to.
Sure.
I'm the news post person of our lab.
Yeah, can you all get in the screen?
Oh, yeah.
I can do
Go
that.
ahead.
Here, let me.
Kill the screen share
Yes.
so that okay, great. And you'll go ahead and gather for the
Gather your gang together.
cameras on the laptop.
Oh, that's true.
Maybe we can
Yeah,
handle
we'll-
it more.
That'll speed. Yeah, good idea.
Could open up another window if you wanted to.
There you go.
You just have Gerber take a photo on our phones.
Did you get everyone? Okay.
Well, there's a guy behind. Yeah,
Okay.
make sure we can
awesome.
see all of you.
Okay,
Still have one hidden soul there. Now come a little farther to the
Okay.
your left.
there we go.
Okay, there, yeah, we'll get them
We still
sorted
have
out.
one.
The guy in the black jacket in the back.
One person
You're
hidden,
kind of-
Jimmy,
Yeah, Jimmy.
Jimmy's
Oh.
fine now.
awesome.
Well, Jimmy lost mine.
Sorry, I don't know all of your names.
Okay, we're getting there. No?
And now,
Hang on a second. So what's going on is they can't see the camera. I can fix that. Hang on a second.
oh, okay.
Double click.
I am going to spotlight them
There we go.
so that they can see themselves, see what's going on. Now they should be able to arrange themselves.
Okay, Montage, do you have what you need?
Yes, I got it. I think we all can do this
Thumbs up.
thumbs up.
Okay.
Your thumbs up.
Great, I got it. Thank you.
All right.
Take
Thanks
care.
it's our cheesy lab tradition. Charlie's has given many thumbs up for my students.
And you for mine.
Yes.
Take care, all. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. I know you probably have another senior design presentation that needs to queue up. So
What's the weather like up there?
It's hot.
cold.
Oh.
Oh, no? Any
It's
snow?
like in
here.
it's like in the 50s.
Oh, okay.
All right. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you.